Jonathan asked, I'm wanting to trade futures. Do I need to get set up with beta? Jonathan, if you're wanting to live trade, I have to enable that on your account, and it does require a paid account, but paper trading futures or options is free for 90 days. So you can use a TradeStation paper account, a simulated account to test futures. And there's really nothing else required that's needed in order to do that. But if you have any questions, definitely just reach out to me in Discord, and I can help you out. Cool. So so this is my local development environment. I'm going to use that instead of using production, so that I can, it's not anything real, none of my real accounts or anything. So there's no risk of me screwing anything up. Everything in TradersPost is built around the concept of a webhook, and a webhook. Let me double check and make sure my screen is recording. 1 second. Yes, it's recording. Okay, so everything is based around the concept of these webhooks, and webhooks are how you can get signals into TradersPost. And signals can come from your own proprietary strategy written in your own low-level programming language, or you could use the webhook URL to plug it into an alert in TradingView. So when your strategy triggers a signal or a simulated order in TradingView, that alert can send that alert to TradersPost, and then TradersPost can take that signal and send it to your broker. So first thing that we're going to do is I'm actually going to delete all of these existing webhooks so I can show you from the very beginning what it looks like. So I'm going to delete all of these strategies. Let me delete the subscriptions first. Delete the strategies. All right, so first thing you want to do is create a new webhook. We'll call this the options webhook. And you want to choose options as the asset class. And let's allow Square and Google as the only tickers we'll allow with that webhook. If you wanted to, you could limit that webhook so that only TradingView or TrendSpider or a specific IP address is allowed to trigger that webhook. We'll just leave those blank because we're going to just test right now. So the next thing that you want to do after you have a webhook is create a strategy. So we'll just call this the option strategy. And we want to associate that strategy with a webhook. And we're going to make this strategy take both sides, both bullish and bearish, both buying calls and buying puts. And under the asset configuration, you want to choose options instead of stocks. And we're going to choose both under the option type. And what that does is when we get a bullish signal, it's going to buy calls. And when it gets a bearish signal, it's going to sell to close the long calls, and then buy to open long puts. And we're just going to do something quick and simple. We'll just do an expiration of 3 months out. And we want to consider 12 strikes. And let's get the second strike away from at the money. And let's just hard code this so that we always buy a quantity of one contract. And let's just leave these fields blank. We're not going to use a take profit or a stop loss. And we're going to enter and exit with market orders. All right, so now that we have the strategy created, the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to delete this TradersPost paper account, and I'm going to recreate a brand new one. So I'm going to go to Connect Broker, and then I'm going to choose TradersPost. And because the market is closed right now, obviously I can't do a demo and submit options orders because the market is closed. But the TradersPost paper broker allows you to submit and fill orders even when the market is closed. And that's useful for testing when you're working on your strategy at night and you want to make sure everything's wired up correctly, it's useful to be able to use the TradersPost paper broker to make sure everything's working. In order to make the TradersPost paper broker support options, you have to actually choose a market data source. So we're actually going to choose the TradeStation margin account that has options data. We're going to make that our market data source for the TradersPost paper broker, because TradersPost internally doesn't actually have options data, and we don't provide data to the end user. So you have to bring your own broker that has market data, and then you can connect it to the TradersPost paper broker in order to give that paper broker market data and hence give it options support. So we'll go ahead and click save. If we go over to details now, you'll see that it supports stocks, options, and futures in this paper broker. All right, so now we have a paper broker that supports options. Let's just see what it looks like manually if I were to go to the option chain for Square. And you'll see now we have option support. I can manually place options orders. So I'm just going to buy one contract of this Square contract, the 1:30 call April 8th. And now I have an open position. And of course, the price isn't going to change right now because the market's closed. So the market price that I got filled at, it's going to stay at that price. But again, the interesting thing about the TradersPost paper broker is it's not a real broker. There's no real filling mechanism. So it'll actually fill you at any price. So if I were to submit a limit order to buy another contract, or let's buy 5 contracts at $5, it'll actually fill me at that price. So now you see my average cost went down. I have 6 contracts total, and I'm up on that position now. So you can see the open positions here, the order history. All right, so now we've confirmed that we have a paper broker that supports options. So I'm just going to close that position. And now we're ready to hook that paper broker up to the strategy that we created earlier. So I'm going to go over to subscriptions, and I'm going to click new subscription. And I'm going to click subscribe next to that option strategy that we created earlier. So just go ahead and click subscribe. And let's choose the paper broker that we just created and configured. All right, so now that subscription is created, it's not enabled yet. So if a signal were to come into the webhook, it wouldn't trigger this strategy subscription. All right, excuse me. So these fields, the emails to notify, that will send you an email every time there's a signal that comes into this strategy subscription. Auto submit means that anytime a signal comes in to the strategy, it'll automatically submit it to the broker and it won't wait for your approval. I'm going to leave this unchecked so you can see what it looks like, and then we'll turn on auto submit later. So this subscription inherits the default values that we configured in the strategy earlier. So you notice that we configured it with both sides. So this subscription here defaults to both sides. Let's choose which tickers we want to allow. If, say a strategy had support for 25 tickers, you could choose only the specific tickers that you want to allow in your strategy subscription. And this section right here allows you to configure which broker the subscription is tied to. We chose the paper broker, so you can see it's selected there. If it were a broker that supports both live and paper, so for example, like this margin account for TradeStation, that supports live trading. So I could check that and it would send the orders to the live broker instead of the paper. So we're going to use a paper broker here, so I'll just leave that setting as is. The asset configuration, again, it gets copied over from the strategy settings that we set up when we initially configured the strategy. And we defaulted to a quantity of 1, and we're not going to use a take profit or a stop loss, and it's entry market and exit market. All right, so you see here that the example entry order and example exit order, this is just like a sample of what would happen if we were to get a bullish signal for Google right now. And based on our settings, this is the contract that it's selected. So let's tweak these settings a little bit and see how it changes. Let's change it to 12 months out. And let's save and pay attention to the expiration date. See how it changed to 12 months out. So now it's the June 16th, 2023 contract. And the price of that is, let's see, it's $430.75. So what happens if I were to get a bearish signal instead of a bullish signal? So you just click bearish example, and it switches to buying a put instead of buying calls. So if you were already in a long call position and you receive a bearish signal, the first thing that it would do is exit those long calls and wait for those long call exit orders to fill, and then it will submit the entry order to buy long puts. All right, so this strategy subscription, I think, is ready. Let's just change this back to 3 months. It doesn't really matter, but let's just change it back. All right, so let's enable this strategy subscription. And now that the subscription is live, we can go back over to our webhook, and we have the ability in a webhook to send a request to that webhook manually. So we don't have to, force an alert to trigger from TradingView or anything like that, because obviously a strategy, you can't necessarily control when it's going to trigger. It's going to trigger when it's defined to trigger. So this send request functionality just basically allows you to manually send a signal to a webhook so that you can test the functionality and make sure that it works the way you expect it to. Let me double check one thing. Let me make sure I have the right thing running locally on my computer. I do. Okay. All right. So let's send a buy signal, and we'll send it for Square, and let's just click send. And you'll see that that trade was created, and it shows up here in our notifications inbox. And let's go check out that trade. And because we didn't have auto submit checked, it hasn't actually submitted it to the broker yet. So this is kind of like it's a draft at this point. It hasn't actually been submitted to the broker, and it gives you an opportunity to review the trade, review the order, make sure it is what you expect it to be before you can either approve or reject that trade. So if I click reject, that gets marked as rejected, and that's it. The draft got canceled. But say I changed my mind. Okay, I actually do want to approve this. So let's click retry, and let's approve it, and let's see what happens. All right, so that that order was sent to the broker and it was filled. Let's navigate over to that paper broker, and let's see. Yes, we have an open position now on Square for the July 15th, 2022 130 strike call. So let's exit that position now. Let's navigate back over to the webhook, and let's click send request, and let's send an exit signal, and let's see what happens. And so the exit signal is only going to exit. It's not going to exit the open position and then flip to the other side. So let's click send. The trade was created. Let's go to our notifications inbox, and we see we have this new exit signal for Square, and it's going to exit that long call that we previously entered. So let's click approve for that. And it's submitted and it's filled. And now we aren't in that position any longer. So now I'm going to show you what it'll look like. Say we've exited those long calls, we've exited the bullish position, and later on your strategy sends a bearish signal, and it would basically buy long puts. But before I do that, let's switch the strategy subscription to have auto submit enabled. So now when we send the signal to the webhook, it's not going to allow us to approve or reject that trade. It's going to go automatically to the broker. So that feature is nice, is like you may not be at your computer and your strategy may trigger a signal, and that signal will go to TradersPost, and we will automatically send it to your broker immediately. So let's go to that webhook, and let's click send request, and let's send a sell signal this time. Now let's see what happens. So the trade was created, but this time, see, it says trade complete. And let's go to our notification inbox, and let's view this trade. And you'll see now that we're in long puts. Let's see, let me look at the chat, see if anyone has any questions. Oh, not yet. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to just put them in the chat. All right, so now we have long puts open in that paper broker, as you can see right here. Now let's send a bullish signal. And because we're taking both sides, it's going to exit those long puts and then buy long calls. So let's click send request, and let's send a buy signal. All right, so the trade is complete. It exited the bearish square position and it entered the bullish square position. So it sold to close the puts, and it bought to open the calls. And that's pretty much it for the options. So let's do the same thing, except let's do it for futures. So let's create a futures webhook. We'll choose futures as the asset class, and we want to we'll allow a couple different futures tickers. All right, so we have that webhook created now. Let's create a new strategy. And let's associate this strategy with the futures webhook. And let's take both sides, so both bullish and bearish. And let's choose futures. All of these settings are only for options, so you can just leave all of these blank. And let's configure it to buy a quantity of 2. And we'll enter market and exit market. All right, so now we have that strategy created. The next thing we're going to want to do is create a subscription to that strategy, which will tie that strategy to a broker. So click create subscription, and then let's choose that same TradersPost paper broker. Actually, because it's futures, the futures market is still open. So let's associate it with this TradeStation futures account. Jonathan Stevens asks, does futures have the functionality to automatically close the long position and open a short position? Yes, it does. And I'll show you that right now. Because I've chosen both sides right here, it'll automatically swap sides for you. And it'll wait until the open position is fully exited and filled before it enters the new position. And that's a requirement from the brokers. They won't let you enter on the other side until the current position is closed. So we'll click auto submit. We'll check all of the tickers there. It's associated to TradeStation futures, and we're going to buy quantity of 2, and enter market and exit market is selected. All right, so you can see now this is an example order of what it would look like for futures. So see how it's buying a quantity of 2. If you get a bearish signal, it's going to sell short, and the exit, when you get an exit signal for the short position, it's going to buy to cover that position. All right, so let's enable that strategy, or that strategy subscription. And let's go back over to our webhook now. And let's send a request to that webhook, and let's see what happens. All right, so we're going to do it for NQ, and we're going to send a buy signal. All right, let's go to our notifications inbox. You'll see now that I have that order was submitted to the broker and it was filled. Something that I didn't show before, these broker logs, these are basically the raw logs of the API calls that we make to your broker. So if you click this row, it'll show you that this is the data that we sent the broker, and this is what they responded with. And you can see the order that was created, just like you can everywhere else in the user interface. So now let's hover over brokers and go over to that TradeStation futures account. And you see now that I have this open long position on NQ. So now let's go back to the futures webhook and let's send a sell signal. But actually, before I do that, let's turn off auto submit so you can see what it looks like before we submit it to the broker. So we'll send a sell signal. All right, so the trade is created. It wasn't auto submitted to the broker because we turned that off. We can click view trade right here as well, in addition to just going to the notifications UI. And let's take a look at this. So see how it's exiting the long position and now it's entering short. So let's click approve. And you can see that the API call to exit the current position was sent to the broker. And then as soon as that order was filled, it sent the next API call to the broker. And that order was filled. So now if we go back to that broker UI, you'll see now that we have an open short position. Does that make sense, Jonathan? Do you have any other questions about that? Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. So the last thing I'll show you, and I'm going to pull TradingView over into my screen. On the webhook, there's this copy button right here. And this basically allows you to copy the URL of the webhook. So let me pull TradingView over here now. And so say you have a strategy. I just have an example strategy called Momo. And you could set these these alerts up on any ticker you want. So when you go to the alert section in TradingView and click create alert, you can copy and paste that webhook URL into this field right here. And so this is an example trend following strategies, just purely for demonstration purposes. The alert name inside of the Pine script is called Project X Buy and Project X Sell. So if we were to choose buy, and then I could say, give it a name like, so SPY Daily Momo Buy. And see how it automatically filled it in with the JSON payload that's required in order for TradersPost to understand what to do when we receive that alert. And you want to make sure that you choose once per bar close. Of course, depending on your strategy, you could have a strategy that is only once or once per bar or once per minute. But in this example of the Momo strategy, you want it to trigger when the bar closes. And honestly, most strategies should trigger when the bar closes. If you don't, you could have an alert trigger multiple times within a bar, and it gets you in and out multiple times as that signal is kind of flapping back and forth. And the signal is really only valid when that bar closes. So if you click create, so now we have this SPY Daily Momo Buy. Now let's create an alert for the sell. And we'll call it SPY Daily Momo Sell. And see how, because I chose the Project X Sell alert condition, it automatically defaulted the action in the JSON to action equals sell. So now you have these two alerts set up, and whenever Momo triggers a buy or a sell, those signals will be sent to TradersPost. TradersPost will see if you have a strategy subscription tied to that webhook. And if auto submit is enabled, it'll automatically send that order to the broker instantly. All right, so I'm just going to delete these alerts because I don't want actual real alerts sent to that webhook. All right. So that is pretty much it for the webinar today. If there aren't anyone have any other questions or anything else they'd like me to cover, or, honestly, setting the same type of system up for stocks really isn't too different. I can do that really quick. So we can do stocks webhook, asset class defaults to stocks. We'll allow Square, and we'll create a new strategy now. Associate it to the stocks webhook. And let's do both sides. And let's do a percentage of portfolio value. What that means is that we'll dynamically, Jonathan asks, have you made a future strategy? I haven't. TradersPost really isn't necessarily in the business of providing strategies for people. We hope to be able to provide strategies for people out of the box. Thomas asks, what is the best way to control how much money goes into an options trade? It's a good question. What you could do is instead of specifying a quantity, use one of these features, $5,000 per position or $1,000. Just be aware that if you choose a contract and each contract costs $2,000, it's not going to submit an order because you've specified that you only want to spend $1,000. And today, the option scanning won't consider the amount per position. So generally, people just kind of choose to just do a quantity of one. And they control how much money gets spent based off of this configuration, because the further out you go in an expiration, the more expensive it's going to be, or the further or closer away, close, depending on how far away it is from at the money, that determines how expensive that contract is going to be. I don't know, Thomas, if that answers your question or not. So for this stocks example, we're going to do 10% of our portfolio value, and let's do enter market and exit market. Yeah, no problem, Thomas. So by the way, if you're in the chat, if you change the, let me pull the chat over here. I don't know if you can see this, but if you change the to everyone instead of hosts and panelists, then everyone can see your messages. So it doesn't look like I'm just talking to myself. All right, so we've got that strategy created now. Make sure it's saved. Let's create a subscription, and let's associate it to that paper broker because the market is closed, so we can't actually submit orders to a real broker. And you'll notice now we've got that subscription created, and you notice how it calculated a quantity of 74, which is a little over $10,000, because we have 10% of our portfolio value entered. So say I wanted to do 50%. Now when we save that, the quantity is going to go up, and we're spending over $50,000 now. So let's associate and allow Square as the ticker, and let's just move this back down to 10%. All right, so we're back down to 74 shares, a little over $10,000. And let's enable the strategy subscription. And let's auto submit. All right, now let's go back to our webhook, and let's send a signal to the stocks webhook. So let's buy Square. Trade is complete. See how it bought 74 shares, a little over $10,000 worth. So let's go over to that paper broker now. And you see now that I have an open Square position of regular equities instead of options. So now let's send another webhook, and let's exit. And it exited the long shares. So generally everything works the same for futures, stocks, and options. And in the future, we are working on crypto support. So it'll generally all work the same. It's just in the webhook, you'll have the ability to choose crypto as one of the asset classes, and we'll have support for the various crypto tickers that you can enter here. And initially, we're only going to support crypto with probably Alpaca and TradeStation, and then slowly after that, we'll add support for Binance and potentially Coinbase Pro. Any other questions? Anything else that anyone wants me to cover? Awesome. Well, I appreciate everyone taking the time to join the webinar. And if you have any questions, definitely just shoot me a message in Discord or send us an email at support@traderspost.io. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dan. See you guys.